Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Sonia Siddiqui, and joining us today is Matthew from Mendix, and he's going to be talking about how to tailor your resume for the software industry. I'm very happy that we were able to get such a targeted webinar today for people who are in the software industry. We do get a lot of questions for sector specific industries, and we're not able to answer because usually webinars are very general, but this is great because it's tailored specifically to the software industry. Before we move forward, I just want to make sure that you are all properly connected. Please know that you are all on listen only mode, so we will not be able to hear you, but Matthew will take your questions towards the end of the presentation. For that, you'll have to type in your questions into the Q&A tab that found at the bottom of your screen. For best results, please use a desktop or a laptop computer. And if you are using mobile devices such as cell phones or tablets, I highly recommend downloading the Zoom app. It's super easy to use and the quality is great. Your feedback is always appreciated, so please do fill out the survey at the end. Please note that all of our webinars are always recorded, so you will get a recording sometime after the webinar, and you can always access the Zoom registration link that you used to log in today with. That will turn into a recording later on. All our webinars are always on demand, so you can just go back to the Zoom registration link and watch it later. That is, you'll have to wait until after the webinar is done. Just to tell you a little bit about ACCES, we've been around for over 30 years helping job seekers such as yourselves. Just in the past year alone, we were able to serve over 34,000 job seekers. We work with over 2,200 employers. We work with various community partners, sponsors, and alumni. We have over 30 tailored programs that include our sector-specific bridging programs, and we do have our IT connections program as well. We have a pre-arrival section for it and a post-arrival. So when you are in Canada, you can also attend the bridging program called IT Connections. And I can tell you more about it towards the end of the webinar. We do have 7 locations in the GTA. However, our main location currently is online. So all of our in-person services have now gone virtual. We are working 9 to 5 regular business days. Nothing has changed except all of our services are now online. So take advantage. It is getting cooler out there. You don't have to commute to go to a location. You can simply just call your closest ACCES location and someone can start helping you with your job search. I'm going to stop sharing here so that Matthew can share his screen.
Hi everyone, this is Matthew speaking. Can you see my screen?
I can, yep.
Okay, this is the first slide, right? Tailor resumes for software industry.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Great. So hi everyone, my name is Matthew. I'm a consultant with Mendix, which is a part of Siemens, and I work with clients. So my job involves working with clients in different industries to build applications using our innovative low-code platform. Previously, I was with Accenture as a technology analyst, where I worked with clients in retail, government, and telecommunications. It was actually at Accenture where I started volunteering with ACCES. I believe it was 2018 where we held a resume review session in person, back when such luxuries were not trivial. I graduated from Queen's in 2017 from chemical engineering, and moving from chemical engineering to software consulting required a lot of learning from my side, especially a lot of trial and error with my resumes. So here are some tips I picked along the way. Hopefully, it'll make your life easier. So without further ado, let's begin. Here's what the agenda will look like for today. We'll go over a brief introduction, which we finished, the presentation, sample resumes. Over the end, I want to look at some sample resumes, and then we'll do a Q&A. So here are the items we'll be covering. First, we'll see the common careers in technology. skills that are required to succeed, the basics of resume construction, formatting, tools, and we'll go over some other sample resumes. So what are some common career paths in technology? I know technology is a little bit of buzzword, but there's a lot of positions that fall under this umbrella. There is no one type of job that exists in software and technology. I try to capture some of the main ones here, but there are new ones coming every day, from machine learning to cybersecurity. In a recent report by McKinsey expects that 8 to 9% of 2030's labor demand will be in new types of occupations that have not existed before. To best prepare your resume, you should have an idea of the types of roles that you are looking for. If you have several roles in mind, then the best strategy is to prepare a different boilerplate template for each. Here are some of the different types of roles that exist in technology. Some of them are a little bit more technical, whereas others require more social skills, such as solution architect or project manager. For instance, being in ERP sales requires a vastly different skill set than one who is a software engineer, such as the ability to communicate effectively. When you apply to these jobs, you should especially stress these skills in your resume. Of course, as your career progresses, you can easily move between roles. Actually, I closely work with a lot of salespeople who moved into software engineering, and likewise, I started as a consultant and slowly moving more towards technical roles. So again, these roles are very fluid as you progress in your career, and you're not compartmentalized in technology. There are many major skills that are required for jobs in the technology sector. And a software engineer needs to be technical and be able to work well with other coworkers. So as I mentioned, some jobs stress different skills. Mainly, it's the ability to communicate clearly, the ability to work with your team members and bring out the best in everyone. You're driven to learn. You're adaptive. So technology always changes every day. So you should be prepared to move on to the best. And detail-oriented. So let's look at some cases. In most leadership roles, you would see that leadership roles stress communication and teamwork. This is why in few cases, project managers are not necessarily good engineers and vice versa. You have to find a job where you can best leverage your strengths and weaknesses. And when you do, make sure you highlight these skills specifically. Usually by reading the job description, you would get a semblance of what they're looking for. Now, we're going to cover the fundamentals of resume construction. Although deceptively simple, a resume fulfills two key purposes. The first is to provide a quick history of who you are and what you'll bring to your employer. Ladders Inc., a famous job search engine, released a study explaining that today's recruiters skim resumes for an average of 7 seconds. Considering that almost everyone today applies for a gig in technology, it's important that you highlight only the most important points. The hardest part of the resume is vetting the experiences for the 2 to 3 bullet points you feel encompasses your strengths and accomplishments the best. Second, you want to set the stage for your interview. During the interview, the interviewer will ask you to expand on your roles and experiences that you list. If you don't feel comfortable talking about it, it's best to leave it out of the resume. In my opinion, the resume is the hardest part. It is impersonal, and it sometimes feels like every nook and cranny of your life is being thoroughly examined. After that, you'll be invited to an interview or be asked to do a coding challenge. From my experience, I was given a SQL exercise. Again, there is no concrete path. There can be anywhere from 1 to 3 interviews before you get an offer. It is a grueling uphill battle, but remember, all you need is one yes. Unless you're an industry veteran or you're applying for a very academic role, the resume should be kept to 1 page. Recruiters receive a ton of resumes every day, and you need to be as compact as possible. Think about an elevator pitch. An elevator pitch is a very short description of an idea or product that explains the concept in such a way that any listener can understand it within a short period of time. What message do you want to convey? So every resume has 7 parts to it. You have your header, where you have your contact information or the link to your portfolio. You have the objectives, where you succinctly summarize who you are and what your goals are in 2 to 3 sentences. This is optional if space is an issue. Skills, also your certifications. Then you have your education. Then you have the quote meat of the resume. For each role, you want to target maybe 3 to 4 points. Obviously, talk about the most recent jobs first. Then you have projects, especially in tech. This section comes in handy when showcasing a personal project that you've worked on. Then you have awards and contributions. Over here, you can also put academic publications and any clubs that you're part of that is very relevant to the job you're applying for. If you're a recent university graduate, then education should come before experience. If you're experienced, then experience should come before education. Either way, the skills should be first. Another pointer is that I've seen people include references or a blurb mentioning that references can be provided. Don't add that. Again, make best use of your space. Having references is already assumed. The header is the most simplest part of the resume. Make sure your name is bolded, preferably at a 16-point font. It should be eye-catching. After all, it is your brand that you're quote selling. Include your email and cell phone number, and divide the cell phone number by periods rather than brackets and dashes. It'll appear cleaner. Especially in 2020, when everyone can work whenever they want, I feel putting the city is a little unnecessary, but put the city if you feel there's a hard limit on whether you can move to pursue an opportunity. It is also important to include a link to your personal portfolio. It can be GitHub, a blog, or your LinkedIn. Preferably something that demonstrates your aptitude to code. Make sure that you show how you solve the problem, so include the code base. Of course, ration your vertical space very carefully. The objective statement is optional, but something I would definitely recommend adding. It adds a succinct summary of yourself. Keep it between 2 to 4 sentences. Use a lot of action verbs here and powerful adjectives. When I'm applying for different positions, I would customize this for each role that I'm applying. A useful shortcut is using the verbiage straight from the job description. Let's look at the example here. An energetic and quick learning graduate with a master's in software engineering and 2 years of experience in big data and cybersecurity. Here, the individual has summarized his or her credentials. And the next sentence is, having worked in technology, I possess strong leadership skills and have led multiple projects. So in the second sentence, this individual tries to build his or her brand. Finally, I'm pursuing roles in consulting where I can leverage my strengths to build innovative solutions to solve real-world problems for our clients. In the final sentence, the individual stresses his or her goals. Skills. The cardinal rule is do not lie. If they catch you, you're finished. You might as well walk out of the interview. Additionally, do not say you're an expert in technologies that you're simply proficient or dabbled in. For instance, a Java expert is not someone who codes occasionally. Also, keep in mind that many companies use ATS, applicant tracking software, to filter resumes by how closely their content matches the keywords in the job description. So include keywords that match with the keywords in the job description. You can also arrange multiple skills in different ways. I prefer grouping them by function. For instance, I would put skills as Microsoft Project, HPQC, and or Jira under a subheading called Project Management. I'll show you an example of this later. I would also highlight certifications, especially if they're difficult to get. The best way to do this is to segregate the skills and certifications in their own compartments, meaning you would have two text boxes side by side with the skills on the left-hand side and the certifications on the right-hand side. This is how it this is how I prefer it looking. So you would have your certifications in chronological order with the dates in brackets, month to date, and take care in not including expired certifications. Education. Avoid listing GPA if it's under 3.0 or if it's over 5 years. If you are an industry veteran, keep education below experience. If you're out of college, keep education just below skills and before experience. So it's a good idea to highlight your GPA, but remember if your GPA is bad, it's only a factor. The other aspects of your application has far more weight. If you need extra comments to fill the space in your resume, feel free to add in any extracurricular or sports you were involved in as subsequent bullet points. Also add any extra schooling such as significant certificates at university if you feel that it carries weight. Now let's look at the experience. Don't just list out your job responsibilities, but rather discuss the effect you've had because of those responsibilities. For example, instead of created modern proposal process, right? Modernized proposal process, which saved 800,000 per year firm-wide and enabled 25 million in yearly revenue. So you want to back it up with quantitative stats and figures. Assuming you're aiming for more technical role, remember to mention the technology language you used, for instance, Python. If you're aiming for more consulting or business roles, talk about the impact you've had mainly in the dollar value. Try having a statement like saving the company approximately 10,000 on a deal and expand on that. Look at the job posting and fix your resume to highlight the same keywords and areas where your experience is relevant to the role. Obviously, use bullet points over paragraphs to be as concise as possible and put it in chronological order, meaning the most recent experience should be higher on the list. It should have more bullet points associated with it as well. If you worked on several projects within your job, for instance, if you're in tech consulting, I try and list the project as a subheading and then have bullets underneath that. It is a lot easier than having one bullet per project. Also, avoid mentioning your client's name. You don't want to expose sensitive information on your employer's operations. So before sending anything out, remember to scrub it for confidential information. Use action words as well. Typically, these are words that demonstrate proactivity, aka you took responsibility. Use these words such as negotiated, created, or led. So implemented versus participated, advised versus told, coordinated versus handled. The final step is list anything that would give your application an extra boom. This is especially important if you recently graduated and you probably don't have much internship experience, or maybe you're a career switcher. You want to convey that you showed initiative outside the workplace and maybe something that conveys your passion. Say you led your sports team to a national competition and won gold back in your home country. This is where you captured that. Something that would really stick out. So examples is personal projects, hackathons, volunteering, and academic projects. Let's look at personal projects. GitHub and other open source projects should be expanded on here. If you're aiming to work at a startup small enough where a developer is also the hiring manager, Be prepared if they ask you for your GitHub account during the interview stage. You can also list your capstone projects if you did something like that in university. For instance, as engineering students in Canada typically do a capstone project in their final year. So this is a good format you should list your project in at the very end. Name, the duration, technologies used, that's important, and some follow-up with some interesting pointers such as what you did and how you did it. Obviously, avoid showing incomplete projects. Your goal is to present something finished online and deployed to maximize success. That said, you probably want something bigger than a hello world if you can. If you don't have any personal projects, you can also find tutorials for this specifically online. Awards and publications are a little tricky. The rule of thumb is that you only list if there are position specific. And having met with some friends that are trying to move from academia to industry, the general consensus is that the industry employers value work experience and results over publication or education history. So if it comes down to ultimately adding an extra publication or fitting in another bullet point for a relevant experience, I'd go with bulking the experience. A good alternative is to also add like a bullet point saying that you published X number of articles below your research position or your education. Let's look at formatting. Like everything in life, how you present yourself matters almost as much as the package itself. For resumes, styling should not take away from the content. Remember, recruiters spend roughly 7 seconds looking at a resume, so it is important to make it easily scannable with the naked eye. Most resumes should be kept at a single page. If it is hard to do that, decrease the margins to give some breathing space. But the only exceptions to the one-page rules are those who have been in the industry for a long time or very academic job seekers. It should look as simple and consistent as possible. Things like spelling mistakes, inconsistent formatting are a big no-no. Double check the small things like periods at the end of bullet points as well. Make sure you submit documents in PDF format only, as Word document files make it corrupted. You can use color as well, but make sure it is readable in black and white. I have seen cases where the name is bright orange, but when printed on a black and white printer, it appears very light gray. Here are a few key rules of thumbs for styling. Styling is not a game changer by any means, unless you're applying for a UX job. Even then, it should not distract from the content. The best font for tech jobs is sans serif. It's clean and simple. Sans serif is more suited for tech. Other stuff like font size is pretty rudimentary. Line spacing is another tool to play with if you can't fit everything into one page or you don't have enough material. Increase or decrease it by fractions. Too much change on your resume may look disjointed. Also, avoid underlines. They make the resume look congested. On the right-hand side, if you don't know how to play with line spacing, I added a screenshot of the panel you find in Microsoft Word to change the line spacing. Let's look at some tools that would make the job hunting process just a little bit easier. So, technology is your best friend. If you want to reach out for advice, I strongly recommend Reddit. So Reddit works by a series of threads where people in your same position or experts can post advice or ask questions. These are some threads I typically follow. So CS career questions, there's other threads specifically aimed for careers in general, and the r/r/resume thread. The r/resume thread is especially useful. So you'd create an anonymous account, scrub your resume, remove any identifying information, post it on there, ask for feedback, and see what the community thinks. It's usually people in the same position as you or experts just trying to help. Fishbowl is another very good social networking app. It's more specifically aimed at technology, at consulting in general, and although you would find a very vibrant community for technology consulting. Stack Overflow is another area where you can get advice on resumes. Last but not least, LinkedIn is extremely useful. Improving your skills. Say you want to bulk up the skills section a little bit more. LeetCode is an especially strong tool that many people use to prepare for interviews or to improve their programming skills. Udemy is also a very good resource, and edX, I know, also offers more academic projects, but if you want to bulk up the project side, I would recommend edX as well. So I mentioned previously the importance of setting up a good portfolio. So you'd see a lot of people having a GitHub account, posting it on their resume. Also, I've seen people maintaining a Medium account. So Medium is more like a news site where you can publish some articles. Also, having your own blog makes a ton of difference. So I myself had a WordPress blog where I had some projects that I worked on, and I highly recommend having a blog where you can, showcase your skills. For proofreading, I'd recommend Grammarly. So Grammarly, so a lot of people don't know, Grammarly has a plugin where you can download the Microsoft Word. For people whose English isn't their first language, or they're struggling with grammar and spelling, I would highly recommend downloading this plugin. Another trick is to use Etsy. Etsy is more like a community art store, but you can download templates for creating a resume. So sometimes it's a little bit of headache fitting everything you want and taking care of the styling, the formatting, and basic UX. I'd recommend buying a template off Etsy for a negligible price. I think I brought my template for $3 and it was a massive help. So let's look at some exercises. I got some resumes off the same Reddit thread I mentioned previously, and let's look at their strengths and weaknesses. A lot of these resumes have taken from the thread on Reddit. I would highly recommend reading through the thread or even posting a scrubbed version of your resume. Many of the comments provide a useful insight. It's worth a skim through at the very least. Let's look at our first resume. This individual is a recent graduate in information systems, most likely looking for a job in the New York area. Clearly, he's not interested in pure programming jobs, but I'm guessing, judging by the resume, he's looking for something more analytical or data science, judging from his past experience. He has a ton of internships, which always look good too. All right, take 15 seconds and read through this. And in the comments section, post the strengths and weaknesses, what you think are the strengths and weaknesses of this resume. Okay, the company name is makes sense because it's also been scrubbed as well. When you upload it to the public forum, you want to remove any personal identifying information. So yeah, in this case, you're not going to get any company names. All right, let's begin. So yeah, there's company names. Uh, Tenses are different. That's a very good catch. And yeah, it does seem straight and concise to the point. There is a lack of experience, and I'd say that the user could have listed some personal projects they have done in the side. But yeah, it could have benefited from maybe listing some personal projects. But I do think that they have, considering that they are a new graduate, I feel they do have a lot of internship positions, and you'd want to stress the internships more than projects if it comes down to it. So let's look at the good points. There is consistent formatting. There is a great balance of white space and text that makes it easy to read. And there are quantifiable improvements. The bad side is that, especially early in your career, you'd like to emphasize the education and skill set. This should be moved up. Also, I feel the skills should be slimmed a little bit. PowerPoint, Excel, and Word are given in this day and age. I also noticed Python listed in the first job but are not captured here. Like, wouldn't you say Python is more important than Word? Also, someone caught that the tenses are inconsistent. That's a very good catch. Something like this affects the flow of the resume. Minor stylistic changes would also be to align the dates to the right. And I'm a little confused on the purpose of this resume. Does this individual want a technical role or wants to go into business strategy? I would add a sentence or two summarizing this in the objectives section. Let's look at the next resume. This should be quick. Please spend 20 seconds going over this and let's highlight the pros and cons. Though this is a strong one, there are a few glaring omissions. All right, take your time. All right, I see David's comment. I intentionally blacked this out because I didn't want to put any identifying information, but there was a good header. Exactly, that's a good point. So this individual claims they were a CTO, but there were no dollar values. That should have been added. The gaps in the timeline I feel are because these are internship positions. Actually, no, they aren't internship positions. They're actually my mistake. They're actually jobs, full-time jobs, but it says in the last point on the first job that it was abandoned due to lack of product fit. So Let's look at this in some detail. The good, consistent formatting, grouped skills by proficiency, experiences mention the tech stack in detail, and they really used action verbs such as architected. Let's look at the weak sides. The skills should be on top. This is where the recruiter eye first lands on the page. That said, I commend the fact that it is sort of grouped by proficiency. Not once did the author try to quantify the impact they had. Did this change improve operations by 1%, 10%, or 100%? It's really hard to see the value. Present tense, there's also a case where they use present tense where everything else was past tense. So that was not a major issue, but a minor issue, but should be fixed definitely. Also, I saw some people commenting on the text, and yeah, I agree with that. They used too many combinations of italics, bolding, and different font sizes. Like take the university, the education area, you have italics, bold, and I could swear there's two different font sizes in the city and in the name in the Bachelor of Arts. Also, the last point does not evoke any confidence. Abandon project due to product fit. Either expand on the reasons or try and spin it positively. So, I'm going to end off with some useful links that you can follow. Here are some references I used for this slide deck. A lot of the resumes I've taken from Reddit. These are two good books as well. I believe the second one you can download free on Amazon, provided you have Kindle. So thank you for listening. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Matthew. Very well presented, and I really enjoyed the interactive activity with the resume. So everyone, you can start typing your questions into the Q&A tab, and that's while we take questions. All right. Okay, so is a cover letter necessary?
Cover letter is becoming increasingly not as necessary as it used to be. So many of the jobs I applied for did not require a cover letter, and you find the industry shifting to that way. So yeah, to answer the question, cover letters are not necessary most of the times.
Thank you. So good question here. This might apply to, this is a specific question, but it might apply to other people as well. So Amy is saying that most of the times in job descriptions, they're looking for example, an Angular JS developer. If Amy does not have a lot of experience in Angular, but in React, is it advisable to apply anyway? And if they do apply, how can they tailor their resume?
I'm not so proficient in Angular JS or React, so I can't talk too
Okay.
much about it. But what I can say is that if you don't have too much experience in something and you want to list it anyway, I would specifically mark it as proficient. Otherwise, I just keep it off the resume, or at least maybe sneak it in within an experience. But I would not keep it on the sales. I would not keep it on the skills area unless you're pretty proficient with it. And you can always increase proficiency by doing courses on Udemy or Coursera. And your second point was how to increase the weight. I can't find.
Yeah, like, if you were to apply for a job that you didn't really have experience in, like, how would you leverage your resume to apply for a job like that?
You would look at the other pointers. So, for instance, they would not ask only one technology, they would ask maybe 3 or 4 technologies. So, if you got, let's say, 3 of the 4 If you filled out 3 of the 4 checkboxes, then I'd say apply for it. But yeah, if you're not proficient, then I wouldn't recommend applying for it. Another good point is to, like, on LinkedIn especially, you can see sometimes the number of people that have applied to jobs. So say you're applying for a job, no one has applied for it yet, and they're asking for proficiency, and you know a little bit of that technology. I'd just say go take the risk and go for it because no one else have applied.
Thank you. And is it necessary to use a period at the end of each bullet point on the resume?
Uh, no, but keep it consistent. So if you're not having a period, make sure that follows through for every single bullet point. If you do have a period, make sure that follows through for every single bullet point. The the key is just to be consistent with your formatting.
Thank you. Could you go back to the books that you were talking about and maybe just go over them again?
Sure. So the second one you can find on Amazon. Actually, the first one as well. Uh, Reddit, I mentioned the threads that you can refer to.
Thank you. And how many pages max should a resume be?
It should be 1 page max. Now, I can't speak for academic, or if you've been in the industry for, say, 20 years, then that would be a different case for you. If you're applying for like a PhD role, I've seen resumes, CVs that go more than 2 pages.
Thank you. Okay, so Norman is saying that I'm always hesitant toward outlining everything in my resume because it means there's less incentive for the hiring representative to want to personally interview to find out if you're the best candidate. What is your take on this philosophy? Should you be outlining everything on your resume or should you hold some information?
Outline the information that you feel builds your brand the best and is relevant to the job description. So if you're comfortable with the interviewer asking you about it during the interview, yeah, list it in. Also, you want to, like, the ways you have to weigh the pros and cons of every bullet point. So yeah, I would love to add like 10 bullet points for every position detailing every
Mhm.
project I've worked in, but you got to pick the project that best demonstrates your skill and has quantifiable information saying that you improved the project maybe 50% or 80% or something you can back with references if they ask you later on to back with references.
Thank
Like in
you.
the, yeah,
Oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
In the previous resume, you can see that the individual talked a lot about their positions. Like if you see this last point, it's abandoned project due to lack of product fit. The last point on the second position is left due to company closure. These aren't something I would especially stress in the resume.
Thank you. For someone who has 10 years of experience with 4 to 6 different companies on their resume, should they be listing all 10 years of experience or just the 5 years with like their highlights and everything?
So you can list the 10 years if you play it well. So for the first few job opportunities, obviously for like the most recent job, you would bulk it up with all the bullet points. For the older jobs, you probably would give it 1 bullet point or you would just list the job. If space is an issue, listing jobs, which, like, unless you worked in a lot of jobs, it shouldn't be. But if space is an issue, then you can remove some of the older jobs.
Thank you. And if someone was working as a manager in their home country for the past 3 years, and now in Canada they're applying to entry-level positions, how should they target their resume?
You should stress the skills that you've picked up in your manager position. So try and apply for manager positions here, but if you're not seeing success, stress the skills that you've picked up, managing people, leadership skills, and try to find roles that target that.
Thank you. Sometimes working experience in a small startup could be important to apply for new jobs, but how can this be mentioned in the resume?
You can depends. If you're looking for a startup job, you can mention it in objectives. And remember, like in the objective, keep it at a very high esoteric level. So you want to apply for startups because you want to quickly so you can mention it, you can word it out well. You want to apply for startups because you want to quickly, you desire the quick growth, the quick career trajectory in a startup, and the ability to make high impact decisions. So it's the way you word it in your objective that really matters.
Thank you. And if someone has a career change and the previous field is not related to the current one, and they want to, start applying, how should they target their resume in that case?
Well, if you're applying for technical jobs, if you're trying to switch into technical jobs, I would recommend building out your project section. So do a couple of tutorials online, um, create a portfolio of some interesting projects that you've worked on, include the code base as well. If there's a way, try and like deploy it online if it's an application, if it's a web app, and add that to your LinkedIn, add that to your resume, and explain what you learned in the project and what you achieved.
Thank you. And references. Is it important to list references on the resume?
No, I wouldn't. No, don't list references in the resume because that's already assumed, and they'll contact you anyway if you're successful on the job, or like during the interviewing stage, they'll contact you asking if for a list of references.
Thank you. And what do you do in case you have a 10-year gap in your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say specifically call it out in the resume itself. I've seen people, uh, not as much as a 10-year gap, but some of them spent a 2-year gap, maybe getting a second bachelor's. So they'd call it out in the resume as a student.
Thank you. And if someone's degree was from 2009, should they include the year in the resume if it's more than 5 years ago?
Yeah, yeah. If you can put the education all the way in the bottom of the resume, since at this stage in your career you would look at skills and experience first. And for the education, I would live, you should list the date you graduated in, but don't add on any more details such as GPA and like clubs you were part of.
Thank you. And is your LinkedIn profile supposed to exactly match your resume?
No. So with LinkedIn, you have the advantage of not being constrained to length. So with LinkedIn, you can add in like whatever you feel stands out, and you don't have to be worried about fitting in within one page. So previously, I saw the question on there was a question on like a 10-year career. In LinkedIn, you can list out every job you've worked in for the past 10 years and describe in detail what you did.
Thank you. And how should people handle the differences between tailored resumes and LinkedIn? Because a lot of people, like I just mentioned, are trying to keep their resume exactly the same as their LinkedIn, but that can't be the case when you have to tailor your resume for each position that you're applying to. What should they do in that case?
Well, the content shouldn't, like what you did shouldn't be different. It's just the wording and how you word it would be different in your tailored templates. So what I'd say is, yeah, with LinkedIn, keep it at a very general level. Just list everything you can think of. But with your resume, only keep the pointers which you feel would tell that specific story you want to tell.
Thank you. And do employment gaps matter in job search and should they be included in the resume?
If it's more than, I'd say more than 1 year, uh, specifically call it out in the resume.
Thank you. So another question here from Amy is a job description is usually prepared by an HR and not the actual manager. So they contain everything. For example, if hiring for a front end web developer, it is listed Angular, React, etc. So including few back end tools as well. So if Amy knows a few of these skills, can they still apply? So yes, Amy, just like Matthew replied before, if you feel confident that you are able to do the job, there shouldn't be anything stopping you, and you should be putting any of your um, relatable skills and focus on that, and there's no harm in applying. Um, All right, next question is, how's the scope for business analytics and analysts in Canada?
How's the scope for business analysts in Canada? Well, Canada is going towards more of a services economy, so there's always scope for business analysts. Yeah.
Thank you. And if is it a good idea to include a PhD if you're not applying for an academic position?
You can list it and you can maybe even call out one or two publications that you feel are very relevant to the job position, but I wouldn't go into any more detail than that.
All right, thank you. It looks like we're at the end of our questions. Oh, we've got another one here. Should you mention diversity in the cover letter?
No, I wouldn't mention diversity in cover letter. Um, yeah, I wouldn't mention diversity in cover letter.
Thank you. And do technical writers have a good scope in Canada?
Technical writers, I don't know much about that position, so I can't speak a lot about it, but I would assume so since I've seen technical writers being employed in classical engineering firms as well.
Where are the major IT hubs in Canada?
I'd say anywhere where you'd find a lot of cities. So Montreal, Toronto, obviously, Vancouver. Yeah. So where you find a lot of technology companies, where you see a lot of technology companies headquartered.
Right. Thank you. And should you be providing the reason for employment gaps in your resume or cover letter?
Yeah, I mean, keep it at a one line.
Thank you. And should there be a section on certifications?
Yeah, so I covered that previously. So it should be separated. Ideally, it should be separated from the skills. So the way I visualize it is that you have two text boxes side by side. On the left-hand side, you have the skills grouped by proficiency, and then on the right-hand side, you have another text box for certifications.
Thank you. Not sure if you could answer this question, but if a person with cloud computing preparation, can they go to into a business analyst role?
I don't see why not, since a lot of the soft skills would overlap, but
Yeah,
I can't really speak to that.
right. And how is a UI UX designing opportunities in Toronto?
It's pretty good. I know many people who transferred from classical engineering going into web development, and they were able to get very lucrative jobs. So I'd say the web designing industry is very good. I'd say starting out, you can't expect to be paid much, but um, if you really demonstrate talent and you're able to single yourself out, the growth is limitless.
Thank you. And what are some good portals to apply for jobs once we're in Canada?
LinkedIn is pretty good. Uh, LinkedIn, the job reference, job board itself of the company, and networking is also very good.
Thank you. And should you have add a point about soft skills, like maybe under the skills section?
Soft skills, no, I wouldn't. You can stress that specifically within the experiences itself.
Thank you. And should online certifications from Coursera or Linda be added as certifications or skills?
Should online certifications?
Like if people have taken any certifications online, like a LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, or Linda, should they be adding that on their resume under certifications or under skills?
Um, I unless it's from a very like reputable source, my experience with actually, yeah, I would list them under certifications, but I would
Thank
obviously
you.
prefer like I prefer like certifications like Amazon. Actually, Coursera is pretty good, but I've seen a lot of people include Udemy certifications, but that doesn't really mean much.
Thank you so much, Matthew. We are at the end of our presentation. Would you like to say anything before we move forward?
Uh, yeah, thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope you really enjoyed it and stay safe, everyone.
Thank you so much, Matthew, for doing this for us today. I'm